If you're like me, and you got no life and there's nowhere to go, then tune in to the Animation Truman Show. You'll be glad you did.
And good morning, friends. Back to work. Well, what are we doing today? Well, let's take a look. We've got a shot in Salt and Light Webisode 5 that is a pretty long complex shot actually that was done in Krita. So this entire sequence here is all one Krita file. So that means it's probably going to be a little bit laborious to go in and do some fixes. So, we need to do that. You'll notice I repositioned the webcam, and I also put my headset phone or microphone back on. Not that the world will stop turning for that. I don't think it will. What I'm seeing in this shot is this looks pretty good. The one thing that's probably most problematic about this sequence is that Asher's color is a little off. And so I'm going to do a little fiddling around in Krita with how, obviously you can do a select by color and do a color correction. But we're going to get some challenges trying to isolate that skin versus this shadow, for example. So there's some things to look at there. The acting and whatnot in this sequence seem to be pretty good. Mel's characterization looks pretty good. So hello. That obviously we need to fix his hand. I mentioned that a couple days ago. But on balance, we're in a good place. Most of Webisode 5 has gotten all the punch-ups done. A lot of it's been eye blinks, just little things to give a bit of life to the characters. Little blink there, things like that. Helps a lot, man. It's amazing how much mileage you can get out of eye blinks. There's another one. So, yeah, the thing I was thinking about this morning is the question I get asked here more than any other question by far is people will ask, do I like Tahoma Krita? Usually it's Tahoma or Krita, and sometimes it's Tahoma Krita or Blender. And so if there's any wisdom here from the trenches for you this morning, it is to reiterate what I've said a few times, but in different ways, which is, I tell you, increasingly, I don't think books help that much. They can help a little, but there's just no substitute for just engaging with the tools, because the answer to the question of which ones do I prefer, it's a mixed bag, and increasingly it doesn't matter. The thing that's been helpful, I've been kind of glad that a lot of these shots were done in Krita, because the liquefy tool is a real difference, between Tahoma and Krita in terms of being able to sculpt a character and dial it into shape. Morning, Amar. Morning, Tom. So there's actually a shot that I just did here in Tahoma, and what I did was I used the selection tool to just grab his beard, and I was really careful to select it carefully so that I could then whoops, didn't mean to do that. I'll show you what I'm talking about here. I might as well save my work since this shot's already been rendered. The closest you can get to what you can do with liquefy would be something like this. You're sort of really careful, and this is what I did. And then you can hit control and you can sort of stretch things. And then invariably you'll wind up having to do a little bit of patching, but the patching doesn't take long. You know, it's usually pretty quick. So in other words, so liquefy is not a deal breaker, you know, in terms of being mandatory. But it is interesting how you get these sort of this crossover between applications. Like if you want a procedural palette, Blender and Tahoma, not Krita. You know, if you want sculpting, Krita and Blender, but not Tahoma. You know, and it tends to go that way. At the end of the day, it doesn't really seem to matter much. And my current opinion about Blender 2.8 Plus is that I don't have an opinion because I haven't actually seen enough shots through to completion to really be able to say. And until you do that, until you do many shots through to completion with a given tool, you really are not in a position to judge whether, you know, both whether it's the right tool for the job in terms of capability and also whether you enjoy using it, which is very important. Anyway, this shot is going to have a bunch of stuff to fiddle with, so let's take a peek. This is shot number 326. Let's open this baby up. Is it in the hot list? It seems like I had it open yesterday. Well, we'll just do it the hard way. Scenes minus 326. Yep, there she is. You know, portability. Portability is Krita and Blender and not Tahoma, generally speaking. You know, you can always find ways to work around little limitations, just like I showed right there how Tahoma kind of lets you work around the inability to do a proper sculpting job. But as you can see, this shot is really long, and it packs a bunch of shots all into one. So let's just attack the obvious first. Here we have the soldiers, and fortunately it's just a single keyframe, so this should be fairly easy to fix up. The background, yeah, we'll turn the background off, grab the character, and what is it I'm really wanting to do here? Let me see. I'm going to pop up a utility layer just for sketching with, and hit the B key, and now I'm going to say that I want. So there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things about animation workflow that you really can't. You can sit here and sort of debate different approaches and this and that and the other, kind of like we were talking about a little bit yesterday. You know, and oftentimes online those discussions are being engaged in by people who haven't actually really done enough of the hard work to be able to judge. And it is interesting, you will find that the more you kind of get down in the trenches with your tools, you will discover that the things you thought, for example, were important turn out to be less important, and vice versa. So, you know, like I spent some time developing a way in Krita, well actually in all three programs, to be able to go directly from pencil to ink very, very quickly by just hitting a single key press and you're instantly inking. Well, the reality is that it's going to be a while before I really know if that is a win or not. Didn't take that long to set up, you know. And it was a good exercise because I had to think creatively about how to use the tools and set up the brushes and things to make it work. I mean, actually, the way I do it here in Krita is I just hit the X key. So on this utility layer, especially for working with something isolated like this, where I'm just working on the guy's hand. It is definitely useful. I just turned the smoothing off. It's useful to be able to just I'm in behind mode. I need to be in normal mode, silly. But for like a little isolated piece like this, like someone's hand, it's definitely, that's where the jumping from pencils to inks in a hurry can be quite useful, because you're just creating an object that you're going to go move around and use elsewhere, right? So, so yeah, I just didn't like the pose, the way his hand was sort of bent back. Okay, so then what I would do here in Krita is, once I know that I'm happy with what I'm getting, I will just use the color to alpha filter to remove the red, you know, because you can select any color and it'll make it transparent. And then with Krita, the actual lines that I just made transparent, the data for those pixel lines is actually still there. So normally what I do is I follow that up with a curves operation that tweaks the alpha, as you can see. And if you look real close, you guys can't see it, but there's actually a histogram line here that shows you where the hidden pixel data is. And as long as we clamp it like that, normally what that'll do is that'll result in a situation where now I could probably, yeah, see, I can fill that in, and it's going to fill quite nicely, despite the fact that that pixel data that was there just a short time ago. So B key, let's see, I hit, yep, X. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add a little indication of this guy's thumb. Okay, cool. Okay, and actually, as I can see, I also need to add a little bit of a shadow. So since we're just kind of going to paste this in, I'm going to do the shadow. I'm going to bake it into the little piece of art here. So the way I'm going to do that is to turn on the alpha lock, and I'm using the freehand path tool. As you can see, it clamps it to the drawing. And then we'll just set our opacity to 12%, which is my usual setting for shadows. And whether this is more shadow than, I think it is, that's more shadow than we need. We don't need that. The knuckles probably are even pushing the envelope a little bit, although it probably would make sense to, I don't know about that. Holy cow, look at all the comments. Well, okay. Dave said he liked what you did to the walk cycle. He had questions on what you did to resolve it. Yeah, I was curious what if you did the in the schematic, if you did like step interpolation, if you changed the step, or what you did. Glad you're reserving that now more than in the past. This is also true for all of us. Till you put that tool through the real test. Oh, that's for sure, man. Absolutely. The walk cycle's in a subscene. Okay. Use the select tool to remove the drawing. Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, so you just did it by manipulating the drawings, just chopping out stuff that wasn't. Well, anyway, let me just read. I can't read and talk at the same time. Yeah, so one thing that makes me think of is, and it actually points up where working things out on paper isn't a bad idea either. Plenty of people do it. That just popping up a utility layer, kind of like I did here, and then just drawing the, the in a single frame that runs over top of the whole animation, just where things are supposed to happen, and so you create a roadmap for yourself can definitely save you a lot of time and headaches. It's kind of like the idea that I think that we're okay. That was stupid. We're often tempted to poke around and not necessarily, especially when you're learning a tool, to not be particularly purposeful in how you work. And so for me, this doesn't just apply to animation, it applies to pretty much everything I do. I sort of have a rule that's become increasingly rigid for myself. I use a task list, and I try to keep tasks usually keep it down to something that's going to be somewhere between 15 minutes and an hour, probably averaging about a half an hour. And my rule is that basically nothing happens unless it's on the task list. And if it's on the task list, by gum, it gets done. I'm not as disciplined as I should be. Because I get sidetracked, right? Plenty of times. But I do find that helps me because, especially with animation, like right here, going into this scene, there's a moment to evaluate it and just say, okay, well, what are we going to do today, right? What are the problems we have to solve? But beyond that, once you dive in, you really want to be purposeful because it's just so easy to just flop around and waste time. At least for me, that time wasting usually boils down to seeing if this will work or seeing if that'll work. And you can wind up going, whoa, holy cow, a month just went by and I really didn't get anything done. And the most deceptively stupid reason to get caught in that trap is the same reason why people ask which software tool I want to use. Is because you're looking for the holy grail that'll make it both fun and easy, I guess, to do the work, because nobody gets involved with animation and then fails to discover fairly quickly that, it's kind of a lot of work. You better like it, baby. Okay, so now I can see something here that would be quite useful to fix. We are in normal mode, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just draw this around like that. And now, yeah, that should work. And then I'm gonna just isolate this layer so I can smack in this outline. So one of the things that's a bit of a mixed bag for me right now has to do with ink and paint in Tahoma, actually, in the sense that the shots I did yesterday, basically everything I punched up in Krita, I'm really pretty happy with. The stuff I punched up in Tahoma has been a little more of a mixed bag. And I do find it kind of interesting and striking, if you will, that the shots that were done through, like here especially, it is notable that a lot of these shots towards the end that I feel like came out pretty good were done in Tahoma, but the actual art was cut and pasted from Krita. So the art was done in Krita. It was just the animation, a lot of it's just like plastic tool right there where Mel bends his neck, where he turns his head or whatever. So, these are just things I'm always thinking about and just observing. So if somebody put the gun to my head today and said, if you have to pick Krita or Tahoma, which would you pick today? I'd pick Krita. Because even though I love and I hate it, the reality is that insofar as the stuff looking good and the basic process mostly being a pleasant, unencumbered process, for the most part, Krita's been getting me there. The difference is when you're starting from scratch, like with the Futurama stuff, just starting from scratch and doing things in the right order. I did it all as a pencil test, and it turns out it really doesn't matter. It could have been Krita. I used Tahoma. It could have been Blender. It doesn't matter. Most of the differences really don't matter until you get to ink and paint. And then you start to see, and then if there's any sculpting or rigging required, then obviously the differences are a little more stark. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to call this the guard's hand. And as a matter of diligent practice here, what I'm going to do is insert an animation keyframe and leave it on its own layer, because I've been so guilty of flattening things out prematurely so many times in the past. And frankly, well, the one thing where Krita is actually pretty consistent in its performance, you know, it really does pretty well, is dealing with lots of layers. Where it starts to fall apart is when you start doing things like transform masks and filter masks, things that have to be processed on every frame. Then Krita starts puking in a big way. Okay, we fixed the guard's hand. So, hey, Golden Slime. Webisode 4 is a continuation of Episode 1. Yes, technically you have to watch them in order if you want to get the whole story. And the way it's shaping up, you're going to have 25 minutes of Episode 1, and then basically probably 5 more episodes for the back half, and then that's your entire 48-minute Salt and Light pilot, you know. So we're almost half done. Almost half done with a double-length pilot, which is cool. All right, let's go back to the beginning here. Okay, so there's a lot of these shots where Asher's color is off. There's one thing I should do right now before I go any further, just to be sure I'm not wasting my time. So 326. So this needs to be set to 326 so that it can render properly. This will basically bake the soldiers. Is that an 8? That's an 8. This at this distance, this screen is actually a little bit fuzzy, so I have to kind of be careful. If I pop the tiny windows up on the other screens, they're easier to see. Premature optimization. That's such a great, yes. The root of all evil, right? Absolutely. Okay, so now if I go back here, what we're going to look at is, oh, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong place. It could turn out that if I really want to make an issue out of Asher's skin color, and I'm not really sure I do, there's a big, I strongly suspect if I never address this, it's no one would ever notice. I'm pretty sure. But maybe. So anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here, split this, and then I'm going to add a secondary color corrector to this. Because if this can be fixed with a secondary, then it's just stupid to, select the effect range. That's the color I'm looking for. If you can fix something with a secondary color corrector, it's really crazy to go knocking yourself out in the animation software. So now if we show the mask, as you can see, actually Vegas just did a really good job of isolating the skin. Now the problem is going to be that it really does need to encompass the shadows as well. So this is where it probably will be easier in Krita, but okay. There we've isolated his skin. And then I want to see if I can, if I turn down the smoothness, That's pretty good. Alright, so now let's turn off the saturation and the hue. Okay, so the hue, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just smack this way up high real quick just to see if it makes any difference. That is probably not too bad. Did that make any difference? No. So it's really a saturation and luminance issue. Okay, so if we turn the mask off, now what we can do is anything that we do to the color will only affect those areas. So if we crank the saturation, you can see right there, that's about all it takes. Holy cow. That's pretty nice. Look at that. So now if we go, see that? Totally. That's the game. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in here Asher, let's call it Pallid Skin Fix, and then save that as a preset, because then I can go to any other clip and apply that same correction to other clips. So yeah, I'm not going to, on this one, I'm going to ignore this one because everybody's going to be looking at Melchizidek. I guess it wouldn't hurt to throw it on there just to see what happens, I guess. So split that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is add a secondary color corrector, but now I'm going to just grab the quick and dirty preset that I just made. So that would be A for Asher. Where the heck are you? There it is. And you can see that worked, and it did not affect Melchizedek. So that's good. So look at that. That's so much easier. Yeah, there's just no... people don't really appreciate the power of secondary color correction. It's just color correction that's also utilizing a mask. That's basically all it is. And you could accomplish the same thing in Krita for sure. But again, you know, once you have a solution, and you know, all it costs me is having to split this into different clips. You know, who cares? And I'm gonna, on this particular sequence, I'm gonna go ahead and let this encompass both of them. So I'm kind of pushing the limit now here and seeing what I can get away with. So let's go here and split it, and then we'll do the same thing again. Secondary color corrector. Basically, a secondary color corrector is very much like a compressor, the way you use a compressor in audio, because if you think about the threshold that a compressor, both the threshold and the ratio of compression, you know, what a compressor says is if the volume of the audio gets above a certain point, then reduce it a certain percentage or at a certain ratio. And so what it does is it takes the overall dynamics of an audio signal and clamps it into a narrower space so it's easier to control. Well, you're really doing the same thing here with a secondary color corrector, because that's what the mask is doing. The mask is essentially creating a threshold for you so that the correction knows where and how much to fix. You see? So it's only going to act on these areas. Essentially, these areas are defining the threshold, if you will. So look at that. That's amazing how easy that was to fix. Now the only downside to this approach would be that if I come back later and I said, well, actually I really screwed it up again, and the fact is that his skin color is still not right, well, then I would have to change it in every single one of these clips. And the solution to that, this is the trade-off you're always dealing with in editing, is the solution would be to put all of these Asher clips on another track. But if you do that too much, what happens is your project starts to just grow, where you have just so many tracks going on, you know. So anyway, BlendedPlanet, what do you find the hardest about executing your script into animation? He does look like he's flashing. Absolutely. And if that gives people a chuckle, that's fine with me, because that's really what he's doing. He's like, look at me. because you know he's got this big ink blot on his most important ceremonial robe because of Mel's little laundry mishap, I think, in the last episode. So, this clip, I guess we'll just do it to this whole clip. You know what would be interesting though? Let's do something here. Let's do something kind of like what I was doing in Krita. Let's add a utility track just for a moment here and test something. What if I stretch this up here and just go ahead and apply that correction to the entire clip after all? The question is, does it introduce any problems anywhere else? Okay, that's interesting. Oh, duh. This is 339. Okay. Sorry. My bad, people. Okay. So what I just figured out is that this can all be deleted. Wait a minute. Sorry, guys. I'm a little weirded out here because I don't recall there being a bunch of editing in this sequence. And that is 326. Oh yeah, that's correct. Okay, let's see what happens if we take all this and go boop, gone. Pop this back down. Since, in other words, if the color corrector is not causing any anomalies in any of the other colors, or at least nothing that's noticeable, then why apply it individually to each one of those clips? Might as well just let it be a single plug-in, and if I click this little icon up here, you can see when I turn the effects off what happens. So yeah, he's just got this gray pallid skin. Alright, and so now we'll do the same thing to this clip. Secondary color corrector, boom. Asher skin fix, where are you? There it is. And my expectation would be that now the entire problem is solved. And the biggest problem with this entire shot is fixed. So cool. We will definitely go with the secondary color corrector solution. Now if you wanted to do the same thing over here in Krita, it would be, you know, I'd really have to think about it. I mean, you can use selections, like select by color, so you could take this thing and go like this. I guess we want to be here. Okay, so you can do that, and it's going to select by color, and then maybe use curves for a color correction. But honestly, you know what would actually make more sense? Probably, because if you can do something with layers as opposed to curves and filters and whatnot, you're generally better off to. If I was going to do this, I think what I would do is I would just add a new layer underneath, okay? Solo this layer, and then let's just put in a skin color for illustration purposes. Okay? And as you can see, there's a bit of a problem because this would have to be alpha locked. So for the moment, we'll ignore that. But basically what I'm thinking I would do is I would use a filter mask of color to alpha, actually. And then I would be looking for the ability to make the skin transparent so that you see through it and the other color comes through underneath. That's what I'm thinking I would probably do. That's pretty darn close. I think that pretty much did it. Let's create a filter mask there. We'll go ahead and play with it. Why not? There's no harm. So let me just think about this for a second. This is where I kind of have to think through what the process would be. Because what I'm really wanting to do is take the result of color to alpha and have that be a mask so that you actually are also... well, let's do it this way. Let's put this in a group. And now what we have to do is look forward and see if this is, again, causing corruption downstream at all. Maybe in the guard's eyes. So now, let me just, I'm just playing here. What I'm going to do is alpha lock that. See what I'm saying? I want to alpha lock it, but I actually want it to show underneath. So, I don't know. This probably isn't worth fiddling with at the moment, actually. And the answer might be right in front of me, and for whatever reason, just the frame of mind I'm in, I'm not seeing it. Because what I'm trying to do is say, I want the color to show through, but I don't want the background in there. Actually, let's pop that up. Oh, I think that did it. Yes. Okay, alpha locking doesn't have to be above, it can be below. Okay, cool. So the answer was right in front of me. And so now this is a little bit questionable in terms of its settings. Doesn't look quite as good as I thought it did. Interesting. So you put the threshold there. And of course you can toy around with the color that you want to turn transparent. And I had it there for a second, then my mouse moved. I suspect something like that is probably pretty close. Let's just see. It's not quite right. Yes, and of course his shadows are coming through. So you can see you don't really have the level of control with the color to alpha effect that you do with the secondary color corrector. For now, I'm going to say, you know, we solved it. There's no reason to continue fiddling. And that's come up in the show a few times where it turned out just using a secondary color corrector was the easiest way to fix something. So let's save our work. Okay, so what's going on up there in the chat there? In other words, what I'm trying to say is you find the hardest part of creating your own series. Yeah, and sorry I ignored you there, Soda Pop. Alright, I'm looking at Amart flagged something. Oh, okay, so I explained why it looks like he's flashing. Yep, color grading. It's incredibly important. It's a very powerful skill to be good at. That's why people should really get handy with the curves tool, because there's almost nothing you can do with any tool that you can't do with a curves tool generally. It does require some practice. You guys must be discussing something that's going on the Discord. I'm guessing you're cutting and pasting a URL or something. Yeah, color balance. I mean, so does Blender. Blender's got a pretty good color balance tool. They all look and work about the same. I'm not a huge fan. I'm generally... Tom's question, if you're talking about Vegas, yeah, I mean Vegas has, yes, Vegas's color grading tools are extremely good. They're not state of the art, but they're pretty darn close. And this is about a 10-year-old version, so they could be even better today. But the basic, you've got color balance, you've got color curves. There's others, the tools that really let you get the job done are pretty basic and have been well established for 20 years as far as color correction goes. The most useful tool to have mastery of is the curves tool for sure. And Krita excels there because Krita gives you the ability to make individual adjustments with curves of each of the channels, including the alpha, hue, saturation, and lightness. So it's extremely powerful. The downside is Krita's great weakness in terms of color correction is it really doesn't have like a histogram function that, well, it does have a histogram that kind of shows you the breakdown of the color within the frame. But what it doesn't do is, like in GIMP, you can put the eyedropper, and Blender too, I think. You can put the eyedropper anywhere in the screen, and whatever color you just selected will show up. So you can find the color that you're looking for that you want to isolate and do something with. If Krita had that, I would consider their curves tool to be pretty much state of the art, So there you go. All right. Color balance is okay. I've used it, and many years ago found that it wasn't as flexible and powerful as some of the other tools I like to use more often. And plus the color corrector, the garden variety color corrector in Vegas is really quite good. So there's the color corrector. So you got the ability to make adjustments in the shadow, midtone, and highlight areas, saturation, gamma, gain, and offset. It's basically the standard set of tools you'd see in any professional video editing / color grading type of program. The only thing that the secondary color corrector adds to that is the mask. That mask that limits what areas of the image are going to be affected based on either the luminance, saturation, or hue. I've found it to be the very vanishingly rare instance where I cannot solve a color problem using a secondary color corrector. Very rare. It's happened, but it's stupidly rare. And usually when it has happened, it's because of, noise and artifacting in the video itself that you would almost have to do some really deep hand tooling of the video frames in order to get it into shape. And it, it turns out, if you're in that situation, it's like it'd be better to just go reshoot the video or something, right? Just go shoot it right and don't have the problem in the first place. Okay, so maybe we don't have the same experience with color balance tool. Yeah, maybe not. I've used color balance a zillion times. There was one movie, it was like my second or third movie, where I used it. This ability to actually, this isn't going to show up. Let me get rid of that. Put it here. So I do actually have a color corrector on this entire track that's not being used, but let's look at color balance. Okay, so what color balance is going to do for you, for those who don't know, is number one, you can select the general areas of the color, content of your video based on are we tweaking the shadows, midtones, or highlights. Okay, so let's pick the midtones because that's going to select the greatest number of colors. And so then what you're doing is you're toggling between green and if you remove green, then you're getting what would it be? Magenta. Or you're adding blue or taking it out, which leaves you with yellow, or you're adding red or taking it out, which leaves you with cyan. Yes, you can, like if you wanted this to look like the Matrix, then a little bit of a shift towards the blue with potentially even a slight shift towards the green, but probably in the shadow areas, would probably get you there. You know, that type of a thing. By contrast, haha, no pun intended, if you use curves, curves are like what you're saying here is that along the range of this curve, I have control over the highlights, midtones, and shadows, all with one tool. So by doing this, I'm effectively making the same type of change. And if you're clever about it, a lot of times you can find that one curve's shift gives you the same effect as multiple you know, manipulations with other tools. You see what I'm saying? So, you know, if what you don't have here is the ability to deal with saturation. That's the biggie, probably. Saturation is certainly a biggie. You know, with a standard color corrector, you can mess with the saturation. You can basically do a color shift. So this right here is effectively the same thing as color balance. You're shifting from here to here, but the difference is the color balance is only giving you the ability to shift from here to here in the green channel. Whereas here, you're saying, well, I can do whatever I want. I can go wherever I want in the shadows. I can go wherever I want in the midtones. And I can go wherever I want in the highlights. So I think it's pretty easy to make the case that a standard garden variety color corrector is also palpably more powerful than color balance. Color balance is like taking a tiny subset of what a color corrector or curves will do and, you know, just puts it in a very simple package, right? So color corrector is like a merge of several filters into one. I would look at it as the opposite. I would say that color balance is like taking a proper color corrector and then whittling away capabilities in order to create an interface that is simple for people. Because a lot of people can't really wrap their head. Wrapping your head around what you can do with curves, I don't understand it. I mean, it might be a programmer thing. It's like indirection, right? Like pointers, shortcuts, things like that, where you're pointing to something that refers to something else. I have found throughout my life that people that are not particularly technical and aren't really working very hard to be technical have a really hard time with even 1 degree of indirection. When you work with the curves tool, you're essentially having to think about multiple dimensions of what's going on in the color space at the same time. If you understand that, then you look at it and you go, oh my God, you know, there's nothing I can't do with this tool, basically. Except, like I said, saturation. Saturation's an interesting thing because with saturation, what you're effectively doing is moving all 3 color channels together in space. So the ability to have saturation wrapped into a curves tool instantly makes that curves tool vastly more powerful. And in Krita, having the hue shift also in there is incredibly powerful, right? Because you can actually do a hue shift based on the bandwidth. In other words, in the high frequencies, the light colors, I don't want to shift the hue, but in the shadows I do. So then you wind up with something like this, where you get this ability to do very judicious and tightly controlled hue corrections. Now, one of the weaknesses again with Krita is the type of curve interpolation that they use. It's not Bezier, and the curve itself is you know, I guess for quick and dirty interactive manipulations like this, where it's kind of like the plastic tool actually in Tahoma, where you move something over here and you really didn't want something to move over here. And the only way you can keep it from moving when you move this is to add another node. So it's very much like Tahoma's plastic tool. What I would generally say that this is pretty much a bad design, because you're limiting you're really limiting people's ability to do what they want to do, because there's always side effects, right? So why they haven't adopted Bezier curves here, I don't know. That actually baffles me, but whatever. It's what they chose, so whatever, people. So back to work. You tend to use leveling curves all the time. Yeah, the only difference between level and curves, of course, is with levels, you're dealing with a linear space. So, and again, this is just for illustrative purposes so people know what we're talking about. If you use a levels tool, it's essentially the same as using a curves tool like this, where you're only changing the endpoints. Okay? Whereas curves let you change, into something more complex. You cannot do that with a levels tool. So, for me, I almost never use levels. It's extremely rare. When I'm doing color correction, levels are like way too limited almost all the time. Once in a while. But because there's nothing you can do with levels that you can't do with curves, why would I ever use a levels tool? I can only imagine the only reason you ever would is because maybe for performance reasons, where you've got 75 plugins in operation, you've got to start to economize or something. But yeah, I would never use levels when I could use curves. All right, so let's just kind of go through here and see what we have, because I actually think I might be kind of close-ish to the end of the road. So I'm just kind of looking for things that flag me. Yeah, non-orthogonal, orthogonal, I guess you mean. Interface like a helicopter. Yep. Okay, so I do see something right here. I would say, I'm hoping Mel's mouth is on a separate layer. It looks like it is. Yes. The mouth layer needs to be made a little bit transparent so that the mouth sits in the mix a little better. Probably about like that. All right. Control R. And just go ahead and re-render that. Boom. Because I suspect that's going to affect all the mouths, and I think all the mouths in the whole shot were too dark. So, yeah, I read a the reason that sampling your color space and having it show up in the histogram is useful is because it allows somebody who is colorblind to actually do very, very good color correction. And I read I think it was Daniel Morales, I think is his name, one of the seminal works on color correction. It was written 20 years ago. And it's based around Photoshop, but the principles apply. But Dan found that he could train somebody who was absolutely colorblind to do better color correction by just using the numbers, just looking at the values and the commonsensical. You come to learn what the general range of reds are in human skin, for example. You just learn them. And he found he could train someone who was colorblind to do better color correction than someone who had perfect vision, but trusted their eyes. Because the problem is your eyes are actually as bad or worse than your ears when it comes to adapting to what you see. And so where you see a contrast, you don't have to look at it very long at all before you don't see the contrast anymore. That's why when I was young, when I was working in a recording studio, I was mixing a jingle, and there was a guy who was kind of mentoring me, if you will. He was kind of responsible to keep an eye on me, I guess. Sparky was his name. Well, his name was Chris, but we called him Sparky. And I told Sparky, I said, yeah, on this jingle, what I did was I was adjusting the EQ on this, probably the vocals, I imagine, but and then kind of bring the levels up a little bit, just check it, and then make another adjustment on the EQ, and I'm just kind of, and he's like, he kind of looks at me sideways, and he's like, that's a really dangerous way to work, because once you change that volume level, the response curve of your ears changes, for one thing. So you're not actually hearing the frequency balance the same way anymore. That's why most people that do studio mixing usually try, if they're going to have a long career, they try to keep the volume pretty low, like below 80 dB anyway. I'm sorry, Soda Pop, I keep ignoring your question. Well, let me ask you this, Soda Pop, since you're here, and your previous comment is correct. Okay, what I could tell you a million things, but really, if you're ready to do it, then, and you're not off topic, so I apologize for ignoring you. Just do it. Just go. Get in there. Start working on it. If you want to post some stuff to the Discord to get some feedback, great. That's fine. But really, what you're trying to do is not only develop your skill, but you're also trying to develop your discernment. Okay, so there are things about the process that are the hardest for me. And probably the hardest thing for me, just pulling this out of my hat, would be doing an animation where a character is moving in a 3D space where they're doing some kind of turnaround, keeping them on character in the drawing. That's the hardest thing. But it's mitigated by just being real careful, you know? But for you, if you're ready to start your project, then just start your project. You discover for yourself what you think are the hardest things. Don't listen to me. What's hard for me might turn out to be easy for you, and vice versa. You know, you might really struggle with the stuff we're talking about here, like color correction. You may, and in fact, I don't consider myself that great at it, or especially at color balance or composition, things like that. You know, so yeah, I mean, I would just encourage you to just go, just start, get busy, and you let us know what you think's the hardest thing. Because the fact of the matter is, my opinion doesn't matter, and it won't be very long before you're into it, before you'll start to see things that no matter how much I tell you, I really can't emphasize this enough, it does not matter what I say, because it will never be real knowledge for you, or meaningful, or really even helpful, unless you do it yourself and you engage with it and you begin to have that experience of developing, you know, your own neural pathways, and you go, oh, now I know what they were talking about. Now I see. Now I see why Dave bitches about Creed all the time. Because, you know, for example, let me tell you what the danger is. Here's the danger. Guys, this is where everybody pause, turn your ears on, and really listen to me on this one. This is a biggie. Okay, this is a huge biggie. I've seen this over and over throughout life. When you enter a new arena of learning or endeavor, whatever is the first thing you learn, the first principle that somebody you see as an expert tells you, that will plant a seed in your mind that sets a standard for you, and because you don't know any better, you will believe it. And there is a real danger that the person that gives you that advice or gives you that pointer doesn't know what they're talking about. It happened to me when I was early in recording. One of the first things I was able to record, you know, way back a long time ago with professional equipment, because I knew a guy that had a bunch of equipment. And I remember the first thing I learned had to do with microphone placement, and what I didn't know was that the guy that was doing it literally did not know what he was doing. I assumed he did, but he didn't. And so I literally went for several years where I was trying to use microphone placement that would never give you a good sound with vocals. And I would wonder, well, like, why I wasn't getting a good sound. I mean, I know it sounds stupid. It's like, okay, just move the microphone closer or whatever, right? It's so commonsensical. But there is a real danger of getting an idea planted in your mind from someone that you think knows more than you, that will cause you to fight yourself against what is right in front of your face telling you is good or bad or right or wrong for you. Don't do it. It's a bad mistake because it can cause you to gauge what you're doing against a falsified wrong standard, potentially for years. I know it sounds extreme, but it's really true. So, you know, my opinion doesn't matter that much. Once you do it, Soda Pop, once you go in and you're deeper into the project and you're developing your own experiences, then you and I will be able to have a conversation as peers. Because I'm going to look at you and go, you know what? I may look at what you're doing and I may not even like it. It might not be my cup of tea. Or I might think it's amazing. Who knows? Okay. But the point is, I'm sure going to respect the fact that here you are, you know, you've gotten into this, you've developed some discernment and some ideas and opinions of your own based on real experience, not based on stupid opinions of so-called experts. You know why people write books and create courses? It's not to help people. Sometimes, you know, that does happen. But the reason you write a book is to sell books. The reason you create a course is to sell courses. People create courses not to help you. It might help you, but that's not why they create the course. They create the course because they're not making any money doing animation, and they need to make some money. So then they create a course and sell it to you for $40 or whatever because they want to sell a course. That's why I don't sell courses, because I'm more interested in doing the real work, right? So absolutely, thank you, Tom. Exactly right. The proof is in the pudding. And what works for me may not work for you for the simple reason that I may literally enjoy that methodology, and it might be a methodology you don't like, or using a tool you don't like. And you have got to find out for yourself what works for you. And I'm going to keep this is the song I'm going to keep singing here for a while on this channel, where I can share my real world experience as best I can, but I'm not really interested in doling out advice. And again, you know, with software, what's better, Krita, Tahoma, or Blender? Yes. The answer is yes. They all have their pros, they all have their cons, and anybody that would ask the question of which is better is a person who is, what they're really saying is, I don't want to take the time to learn. I don't want to make an effort. I don't want to try. I don't want to do anything. I just want to be told, because, you know, I'm getting a little, you know, no pun intended again, animated. But what you're really saying is, I don't want to expend any effort at all. I just want you to take my hand like my daddy and make it easy for me, so that I won't make mistakes, or so that it'll be fun or it'll be easy, but I don't really have to expend any effort. Well, if you want to do that, go on Facebook and you can find tools that you can buy for a one-time cost of $29.95, and you'll be able to. The one I saw yesterday was hilarious. It was a course. I think it was $30, and it was a course on how to create these little sort of like chibi characters in Blender. And I'm thinking, it's so stupid, because if people do that, then maybe those little chibi type 3D characters will become a thing. And then it'll become so common and so easy that it's not cool anymore. So by the time it turns into a course, by definition, it's no longer cool. Right? By definition, you're too late. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. What I'm doing here cuts through all that, because what is important is the stuff that is independent of tools and really techniques even, which is just storytelling, characters, you know? It's the stuff that's timeless. Did I just see Valerie pass me? Hey, there goes Valerie. There goes Valerie. All right. So we do have a problem with the mouth. I got to turn the opacity of it back up. Yes. Yes. Okay. Turn the opacity up, and we need to do what I did with a color corrector. Strike that. I cannot do it with a color corrector, because look, the mouth has a bunch of flesh tone around it, and I'm going to give myself a bunch of work to do chopping that out in order to make this work. So what that means, unfortunately, is that I just need to basically say, okay, where is their mouth problem? And I need to fix them one by one. So Control M. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fix it with the alpha. So what I'm going to do is just go, whoops. Slight turn down, about 25%. Boom. And I'm just going to toggle through here. Let's go back here. Yep, we just have to do it one by one, unfortunately. Yeah, that's too dark. 1, 2. That one I can't fiddle with. Yeah, and this is way too dark. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, got it. I'm going to hit Control R, render that, boom, and then take a couple minute break. So I'm going to turn off my microphone and my webcam, and I'm going to be taking a break here in half a second for about, I don't know, probably 5 minutes. Take a bathroom break, get some more tasty beverage, blah, blah, blah. Boom, I am back. Okay, anybody see anything really egregious here in the shot that they want to flag? HAL 9000. Looks like you have some motion blur in there when he opens his coat. How did you achieve that? Great question. Very simple. Krita has a, let's see, this would be, that layer should be pinned to the timeline, by the way. So yeah, right here, what I did, I can see, what I did was I made a selection, like this, of the stuff that I wanted to blur, and then Krita has a filter in the blur department called motion blur. Pretty straightforward. So, and you can pick the direction of it, you see. So that's quite useful. That's what I did. I don't use it a ton, but sometimes things happen really fast, and it just helps hide, makes it less choppy or whatever, you know. So. So there's features, by the way, I would mention. Like here you got a bunch of duplicated frames. This is repeated. So somebody new to Krita 5 especially would probably be tempted to use clone frames for that. And you can do that. The methodology is to copy the keyframes first. You copy the keyframe, and then you go over to wherever you want to put the new frame. And then you keyframes, what is it? It might be here on the, where the heck is it on the menu? I can't find it on the menu. Well, create duplicate frame. Oh, I guess you clone it first. Okay, I had it backwards. You clone the frame, and then you paste the keyframe, and then this will be a clone, which means that if I change one, it changes the other. I don't use the feature a lot because it turns out that it's just one of those features that tends to, you know, you start fiddling with it and then things start blowing up because a lot of the new features in Krita 5 are still pretty buggy. So the only thing in Krita 5 that I really use much at all that's unique to Krita 5 is two things. One is, and this is the real reason I am still using Krita 5 actually, despite the bugginess, is that your Krita files remember their render settings. So that's huge. So you don't have to go in and tell it where to render to every time you reopen an old project and have to make a little change or something. So that would be one. And then the other one would be the transform masks, the ability to animate them. But actually, I've been finding I really haven't even been using that very much. So hopefully that helps. All right, so this shot, pretty sure I saved it before I rendered. So I'm going to go ahead and just look through the webisode and see if there's anything else that's flagging me. And actually, let me pause that. I'm going to let this cycle for half a sec because I need to go grab my tasty beverage, which is simply hot water. Usually I have coffee in the morning, and then after I have my 16 ounces of extremely strong coffee, then I just do hot water. So my cup is empty, and that is not good. So I'm going to be back in just a second with I'm going to be gone for like 30 seconds. Okay. Yeah, this webisode 5 has been a little bit scary in that I really only was working on it for a day or two before, you know, Futurama weekend last weekend, where I basically worked on the fan Futurama all weekend. And now we're only into about the third or fourth day, and we're pretty darn close to being ready to go knock out the voices and musical score. I need to do obviously the segment previously on Salt and Light, and what's coming next kind of thing, just to sort of package it into a proper episode. And but yeah, I'm really liking this webisode in terms of just the secondary animation stuff I've done. Just eye blinks and occasional tweens. There's an egregious thing here that no one's probably going to notice. It's coming up here in just a moment. See if you catch it. There's a really goofy mistake that I'll bet you no one will ever notice, other than you guys, because I'm telling you. Did you catch it? I'll show you again. It's comically stupid what happens in the shot. Let me scan through here. It's right here. See it? Did you see it? When she flips, the stuff on the tray also flips, which of course makes absolutely no sense. Now you could fix that actually really easily by just making both items the same color. And then it'd be like, okay, it appears that they maybe change size a little bit, but basically who cares? So yeah, that's pretty bad. I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to leave that for the many, many millions of fans to see if they catch it. Okay, that'll be our little... Pink Lady should be in the background, but isn't. Okay, Pink Lady meaning Fala. That's the slave girl. Fala should be in the background, but isn't. Okay, let's see what you're talking about. There she is there. I think I know what you're talking about. Let me see. I'm not sure where you were talking about because we never got this far. Where is Fala missing? There she is there. Doesn't Tianara have the wrong wall behind her too? Darren, what are you here causing trouble for, dude? Okay, so yeah, we've got the rock wall here. And the rock wall here. Oh, it's probably no, that's looking from the vantage point of that wall. Rock wall. So we got a gray wall behind those guys. I mean, for me, the only thing in this sequence that's a little bit questionable is the fact that this is mostly a solid wall. Okay, so kind of go with me on this, guys. So what I'm arguing is that when we look through the bars at Golik's back and at Fala's back, that we're actually looking through this window. Okay, that's the only way you can justify the framing of the shot. Again, I'll tell you, I will guarantee you this is the kind of stuff that no one would ever notice watching a show. Never in a million years would anyone notice that. But, so the palace was 3D modeled? Hell no. This part? No. This was all hand painted. All the backgrounds were just hand painted. They were all done in pretty quickly, actually, because, I mean, if you look at what this really is, this is just a, it's really just a textured pattern of, this is probably a good thing to show, like, for people who might wonder how can I do something like that. It's really simple. Okay? You've got a noise pattern. I'm going to just do this. I'll show you guys. This is actually so stupidly simple. It's ridiculous. Okay, so what would I do? I'd say let's grab a brown color. Brown. I'm talking like a southerner here. Let's just grab a brown color that's a little bit tilted toward the yellow and go like this. Okay, so now how do we turn that into a rock wall? Watch, we're going to do this really, really fast. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is duplicate the layer and then add a noise filter. Okay, so where is the noise filter? Random noise. Okay. You could use random noise, or you could use pick. I don't think it much matters, but so we add some random noise, and then we'll just put it in, let's say, overlay mode. And then, okay. So now for me, that texture is probably not, it's a little too fine grained. Okay. So that's okay. We'll just go like this. We'll just make it way bigger, like that. Okay. So there we go. So now we've got the noisy background, and if you're happy with it, then Control E, just bake it down. Next step would be to, you could have another layer with, and I think the way I did it was, you take kind of a big brush like this, and what you're doing is you're putting these, you know, you're basically deciding on the direction of the light. So I'm not going to do this as carefully as I did when I did it the first time, but the idea is to just kind of go like this, and then just dial it in. Okay, and then do the opposite, which is to add highlight. So again, this is just a broad kind of example of what I'm talking about. To get the 3D dimensionality in it, and then probably you're going to have some gradients like this now. And by the way, the background here, the background color, it's really too light. So I might crank the volume down, and even maybe the saturation just a little bit, something of that nature. And then you know, a gradient to sort of give some framing to it. And then if you want to take it even a step further, you might be doing something like adding. So what I'm doing here would be kind of like creating the cast shadow. Like that. Right? So now we're getting this cast shadow that sort of interacts with the what would you call it? It's not the cast shadow, it's the sort of the natural shadowing of the material. You know, and then just kind of dial it in. So, I mean, that's not exactly the same, but it's the basic concept of what I did. On the gray wall, the gray wall was more of a careful hand painting situation. Whoops. Where you're saying, okay, now what we're going to do is kind of, you know, paint in the floor, and then what you want to do is you want to have like some cracks in the wall or something, right? So you say, okay, well, there's my cracks, but if you're going to do that, then you have to go back into it and catch the light. So actually making this type of effect that looks nicely three-dimensional is really pretty darn easy, you know. And then what you do is you kind of throw in, you know, a little kind of a chip or a hole in the wall or something, kind of randomly. You just kind of throw that in there to make it look a little bit real, I guess, you know, because it's flawed. It's got little cracks and breaks in it and things like that. So that's pretty much the gist of it. Form shadow. Hey, Ed. Well, okay, guys. Ed, today I was in the house. If you want to know about background painting, oh, you're talking about outside. I'm sorry. Well, okay, so all that effort was wasted. I don't remember what I did here. If I remember correctly, what I did was I drew these shadows, or these shapes, and then I just used an airbrush to give it the gradient color around it. And then I went in and just hand painted just some, you know, some shapes. But what I wanted to say is that if you want to see really, really good background painting, like as good as it gets, really, then go to Ed's channel, Ed Tadeo, because he is, not only a very good animator, does a lot of really cool work with Krita, but Ed is absolutely superb at background painting, way better than me. And he's got a couple. I don't know what you've got out there, Ed, but I think you got maybe some speed paints or something that kind of show people the process of background painting. So he's right there in the chat, and if you don't know Ed, then you need to go subscribe to his channel immediately, because like I said, he's infinitely better at this than I am. So anyway, back to work. But yeah, this was actually not that hard to do. Now, it was done in 3D. I mean, in the sense that you've got multiple layers that, you've got parallax going on. But if I remember correctly, this was not a particularly difficult painting to do. Let me see if I can make it a little bigger here, because I don't want to go try to find the project at the moment. Oh, let's go best full. Okay, yeah, so now you can see what I'm talking about. This is just scribbles. I mean, this is just a simple shape. And then I think I probably airbrushed a little bit of a glow around the edges so that it sort of looks like it's backlit. And then I deliberately added a little bit of yellow light here to sort of suggest that this is the, it's where we want to bring your attention, because that's where she's kept prisoner. So the parallax effect, I don't want to really break that down right now. I will just say that you can do that. For me, you're going to probably do it in Blender, or you're going to do it in Tahoma, because Tahoma will allow you to actually have a 3D space and you can animate the camera. Speed paint time lapse. So there you go. If you guys want to, if you want to learn about background painting and drawing stuff and giving it three-dimensional form in a sort of an anime type of style that's consistent with what you see in the shows that you like, then Ed's channel has really good stuff. If you want to do parallax in Krita, it's going to be a little trickier, because what you're going to have to do is have multiple layers that are basically each just scaling at different rates, and you have to hand tool it and fake it, basically, right? So if you want true 3D, you really need to be in either Blender or Tahoma, well, or OpenTunes. Obviously, OpenTunes, same thing. So you can see now what I was talking about. This is just a noise pattern with a gradient on it, and then some very judicious hand painting of the texture of the space between the rocks. That's really all this is. It looks way better than it is in terms of complexity. It's really not. And it does look good. I mean, I'm happy with how it turned out. And then here, of course, it's just a matter of chiseling in this shape with a highlight. And then the shadows are what sells it, actually. It's just the cast shadows are what sell the idea. You could make it maybe even a little bit better by having these shadows follow the form of the rocks a little bit. That would probably be an improvement, I guess. So there you go. There you go, friends. What time is it in the Philippines, Ed? Right now. Must be about evening for you, isn't it? So, yeah, I'm looking for where... I'm still kind of looking for that thing where somebody noted that Fala seemed to be missing in the background. I'm not sure where that would be. But man, I've been getting a lot of mileage out of eye blinks. Just makes, it adds so much pop and life to, an economical animation. But yeah, I did complete head replacements on her and a bunch of shots yesterday and the day before, just because she was off character like pretty badly through a lot of this sequence. It's been pretty cool how quickly the fix-ups on this webisode have gone. Okay, so actually there's a criticism. Theoretically, 372 probably should have the bars in the background, probably out of focus. Let's do it. Let's rock and roll. This is 372. Boom. 372. There it is. Let's open her up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cheat. I am going to cheat by grabbing shot number... Hello? Where are you? I got to find the shot with the bloody bars in it. And I'm going to actually defocus them for this shot. How did I miss that? I missed it again. Oh, I know why. It's back here where he first approaches her. Yes, right there. Okay, so this is going to be 349. Let's pull up 349. Boom, 349. Okay, and then this is the group. Yep. So now Krita lets you copy layer, and that entire stack of layers, because it's in a group, is going to get copied to the clipboard. Come over here, paste layer, and now what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to go ahead and merge the group, so I just flatten the layer out. So there it is. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a quick curve adjustment here. I want to darken those down a little bit, and then I'm going to blur them so that they're defocused in the foreground. So we just do a standard blur, and then what I'll do is I'll hit Control F to redo the blur until it starts to look wrong to me, and then just hit undo a couple times to dial it back. So there you go. So we'll call this bars in foreground, and this is shot number 372, and we need to change the render settings, which will now be baked into the Krita file, which is quite useful. And is it a ping sequence? Yep. So there we go. There we go, friends. And now when we jump back here, we will discover that it's updated with the bars. Yep, there we go. So yeah, theoretically we're looking through that little window. And I would say, yeah, we don't want them there. Now the camera is in the cell. Technically the foreground bars are way too thin to be the window bars. Yeah, I'm going to let that one go though. I agree with you. For the moment, I'm going to let that go. Now, you could say, well, okay, what are you going to do about that? You basically go like that. Maybe something like that. Maybe something like that. And then you kind of want the other one in there. Maybe like that. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not loving it. This might be an example where we're... I don't know. That does actually frame it up kind of nicely. Let's go with it. Rock and roll. Who cares? It's all good. So, thank you, Tiny Salad. Appreciate that tip. Every once in a while, you seem to... Oh, say 11:28 p.m. Okay. So, wow. So, you're literally 12 hours different from us. So, what is this, I wonder? Oh, that's just like a sketch or something. So, we'll get rid of that. Save that. Okay. So Tiny Salad gets the no prize for a good suggestion there. Thank you. Yeah, I agree with you, Tiny Salad. Actually, that does look better. So do I need to, as a matter of completeness and due diligence, do I really need to do it here too? Yeah, I would say so. Yep, Tiny Salad, I'm going with you on this one, buddy. 349. Let's do this one too. In fact, I am going to actually copy this layer just in case it cuts and pastes really nicely into the Golek shot as well. We'll see. We will see. Okay, so we'll mute that group and let's paste the layer. Yes. Yep. Do you guys agree? I think that looks better. These are too sharp and yep. The pink bars behind the, oh, that's what you're talking, okay, yeah. So I am going to actually merge this group. I'll just call this sharp bars and leave it turned off, and we'll leave it in there. So this should render immediately. 349, yep. So there we go, we fixed that. Yes, better framing. Blur the shadow of Golik. He's very crisp outline. Oh, you mean here in the, okay, now that one I want to think about. Let's give it a crack. So what we'll do is we'll go, let's add a blur. But what we'll do is we will make it a filter mask so that it's just kind of automatically applied to all the frames. And as you can see, create a little slower on the preview. Nope, I'm sticking with, I don't want to blur it. That's a step too far towards realism, as opposed to that sort of, this is a little more cartoony. I think for me that is better for this shot. Okay, so Tom's question is a good question. And what he's asking about is here when Fala comes in, you can see this green, or this green. You can see this pink tint on the bars. Okay. So he's saying, why in the world would there be a pink cast on the bars? Explain this to me. 362. Well, let's find out. 362. I was telling Valerie, I'm really glad that, to my surprise, I'm kind of glad that it turns out these shots were done in Krita, because it really is, if you have to do punch-ups on a shot and fix things, it really is easier in Krita than Tahoma by kind of by a landslide. Okay, so what Tom's saying is, what the heck is this all about? And the answer is, I don't have a clue. I don't remember. It's been too long ago. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just grab this area here, hit the curves tool, and let's just dial back the saturation, shall we? Okay, so you can see that that does create a problem, so that means we need to be a little more selective. So S key. So I'll just grab this, hit shift, grab this, grab this. Okay. So now we're going to tone down the saturation a little bit. And you could arguably say, well, let's also see if the hue can be shifted somewhat towards the blue end of the spectrum, like that. And what I'll do is I'll create a filter mask just so I can turn off the selection and make sure I'm happy with it. Okay. I would say, yeah, I am happy with it, with one little tiny caveat, which is that I'm thinking I want to dial in the painting highlight a little bit, so I'll flatten the layer, and now what I'm going to do is go in here with a, whoops, B key, my pencil, but I'm going to make my pencil like large, okay, and we're going to turn the opacity way down. We just want a suggestion here, you know. And then this little bit here, I'm just going to kind of fix that. Yeah, why is there almost an indication of another bar here? That doesn't really make sense, does it? Okay, N key. Is that better, Tom? You like that better? It wouldn't be reflecting her dress. That would be obviously ridiculous. So, but if you agree that that is suitable, this is shot 362. It looks like the render settings are already dialed in. And so there we go. The pink is fixed. Anything else you want to complain about there, buddy? Aha! We actually have the same issue on this shot as well, on 357. So, sorry. I'm going to grab this background and copy the layer. And then what was that, 357? 357. Okay. Open up 357. Well, none of these, I mean, all these issues are because of just carelessness on my part. That's for darn sure. So, there it is. All right, so we got, unfortunately, I don't know what the heck I was thinking with the whole pink thing. I do not know what I was thinking. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, I'm going to have to make some adjustments. I'm just going to do this manually, actually. I am not going to use cut and paste. Just going to do the same basic thing again. You know, if it's strong enough to catch Tom's attention, then it's probably a problem. So there I just did a select by color. And now we are going to... actually, before I deal with the saturation, I'm going to actually make the shift to the blue first. So I can kind of see what I'm doing here. So we don't want to get to purple. Something like that. Something like that. And that didn't work. Oh, come on, Krita. I guess lightness isn't going to do the trick. Let's go to RGBA. And why are we not... Oh, it's still on lightness. You silly goose. There we go. There we go. There we go. There we go. That's better. And then we've got the same situation here, but that's just a matter of taking this background image and going ta-da. Okay, Control R. This is shot number, better make sure. This is 357. This apparently has not been modified since we started working in Krita 5. So 5.7. Hopefully this is a ping image sequence. Let's find out. Yes. Okay. They looked fancier, but I agree with Tom though. That's a little bit of a distraction. Pink keeps the prisoners calm. Right. Well, the goal here is not to keep anyone calm. You could just fill with a color here, Dave. Set to hue on the layer blend method. Of course you could. Of course you could. Sample from the bar where it isn't pink and fill the selection blend. Yeah, there's 10 ways to do it, you know. No question about it. Always way more than one way to solve a problem. So, ain't that pretty? And there's a problem. I was thinking... Yeah, and that shifted a little bit. See, okay, this is interesting. I did a... Yeah, I didn't see that coming. How embarrassing. That means there's a little more work involved, unfortunately. Okay, let's just deal with it. Okay, okay. So, here... Yeah, I was thrown off. I made this mistake because... I did not realize that it was the same, because this was zoomed in. I was thinking the next shot was a closer shot, and so the slightly different background worked, but it doesn't. So here's what we're going to do. I like this better. I like the little bit sharper version of it. I think it plays nicer. So what I'm going to do is, I don't know if I can copy the frame directly, but let's try it. So I'm going to hit Select All and Control C, then come back here and see if it will let me Control Shift V. Yes, okay, it did. I pasted it in. So, the only slightly egregious issue is that the cropping on Fala now has a little bit of a black border on it. Is that a problem? It's not much of one, but we could fix it. So, let us pull out our paintbrush. B key. We'll sample this color. And hello, Krita, really? What the heck was that? It's not fun when software acts stupid. Wow. I'm like sitting here painting and it just like jumps to the other scene for no apparent reason. Maybe my mouse or my stylus did something that I was blissfully unaware of. So I'm just going to soften this edge right here. And if it's not perfectly straight, that's okay. That's okay. Okay, I think we're in good shape. Let's find out. Yes. Now, is that actually better? I think that is debatable. I'm going to rethink this just a little bit, and I'm just going to do something here. I'm going to put the opacity down low and just draw a line here. Yep. Oh, I see what I did. So it was my fault. Big surprise there. Okay, I like that better. And now, as you guys can see, I made a burbo. Oh, come on, Krita. I hate the way Krita does that. If Ed is still here, he will concur with me on this. The way Krita like thinks for you sometimes and says, "Oh, you clicked here. You must have wanted to grab this whole column." It's like, really? Seriously, dude? I don't think so. Okay. Render. And we are back in business. The shadow lines from the bars in the window, the inside wall. Seconding what Tom is saying about the shadow. Okay, let's I gotta go back in. You guys are making me work here. Okay, next problem. The cast shadow would not flow down the shadow side of the wall with a light source outside. I'm sure that's true. And the light source inside would probably remove any shadow there when your eyes adjust. Outside the window will just look bright. Just lock layers that you don't use. Yeah, I don't usually lock layers a lot, but I will like turn them off and things like that. So technically what Tom's saying about the cast shadow. The shadow lines from the bars in the window on the inside wall. I know exactly what you're talking about. The darker line is better. That's my problem too. What are you referring to there, Ed? Your problem. The thing where it jumped, where I came up here and it jumped to the other shot or something? I'm not sure what you're referring to there, buddy. Okay, let us save our work. Save. And go back here. And what everyone's complaining about vociferously is this. Saying these shadows wouldn't be there like that. Do you have any advice on coloring without just filling in and that's it? That's too broad of a question. I'm not really even sure what you're asking. Are you talking about coloring in the sense of doing coloring on your characters? Or are you talking about, I assume that's what you're talking about, on character stuff as opposed to, you know, kind of this painting stuff we're dealing with right now? Yeah, can you clarify the question? Okay, so we certainly would have the cast shadow on the floor. But what you guys are saying is, Dave, you're so stupid. The shadows wouldn't crawl down the wall. Okay. Okay, guys, you win. 351. Let's close these guys up. I thought I'd just save these. 351. Boom. 351. And 351 appears to be a Tahoma shot. That sucks. I want to select one keyframe, but when double clicking suddenly, yes. Is that what does it? Actually, I'm going to jump back here, just grab a scene for a second to see if I... Okay, so if I grab this, that's what I wanted. If I grab this and I double click, okay. So double clicking selects the column. Thank you, Ed. The main problem with Krita 5 with the timeline usually has to do with things like selecting a range, or sometimes like you'll click here and then you click here and Krita will sort of decide that what you really meant to do was select a range, and then you hit play and it starts looping. You know, stuff like that. It's just, they just have not dialed in the user interactivity on the timeline. And by the way, this is 368. Hang on one second here, folks. This is kind of important. I want to reopen that because I made that little change in the keyframe. Because look what we have here. I'm going to take a real chance here. It worked. Wow. Okay, I'm not going to do that though. I'm going to say, let's undo that. Let's do it this way instead. Let's hit Control V instead of Control. Okay, why? Oh, I see what it did. It put a keyframe. Okay, that's kind of stupid. Why did? Oh, because that's where the keyframe is probably in the other shot. Okay, so you see what I did? So now I got to make a slight adjustment to this, but that solves the color problem. I just stumbled on this by accident. So what I'm going to do is set this to half opacity so that I can then just make this little adjustment. Little adjustment like that. Drag this over here. It doesn't have to be exact, but have it be close. Turn the opacity back up. And now we have replaced that background that still had some pink in it with the corrected one. Nice. 368. This is 368. In other words, the render settings are all set up, so good. There we go. That was a pure stupid coincidence that I happened to stumble upon that. Yeah, and Tom's in the comment. Yeah, if they can get the interactivity in the timeline dialed in to where it's a little bit more like it was in Krita 4, I think that would be quite nice. Okay, so what was I doing before I so rudely interrupted myself? 351. Okay. And I said that's a Tahoma, so let me open up Tahoma and see what we got going on here. 351. All right. And I'll just go to the browser. Scenes. Come on, Tahoma. Come on. You can do it. You can do it. Okay. 351. There's 35. Okay, we got 350. This is 351. Oh, that's right. I remember there was some anomaly with 351. I'll tell you the truth. This may be one of the very, very few missing shots in the show. So I'm going to check two more things real quick, and if it is, then I have a way we can fix this. So first of all, let me just check this number, 351. Okay, that doesn't do any good. Minus 351 is just a ping. So I don't know what happened here. I noticed this a couple days ago and then sort of let it go. But what I'm going to do is create a new shot, and we're going to immediately save this as anime salt and light scenes minus 351. Dot ping. I know this is very bizarre naming, but there's a reason for it. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just import the animation frames from the rendered shot. It might seem like almost tragic that we can't get back to the original layers, and in some cases it would be, but in this case it just doesn't matter that much. And you'll see why here shortly. So 351. What we're going to do is just import the animation frames. So this is what you do when you're screwed and you have to find a way to fix something. This is one way to fix things. Okay. So I'm going to just import the animation frames. There they are, and we have a problem. Okay. The original was full HD. Got it? So I don't believe that I can. Oh, I guess I can. I can scale this. Okay, so what we'll do is we will, I know this is an extra step I shouldn't really be having to take, but I'll do it anyway. So what I'm going to do is, I'm trying to get it to scale from the upper left hand corner, and I guess I need to hit shift to maintain the, so shift and alt. Okay, so there we go, and then I'm going to flatten the layer. Okay, because just all the, I mean, I'm just working at Broadcast HD. It is what it is. Some people puke on that and they're, oh, why you have to be 4K or you have to be full HD. People go nuts. And then what I tell them is, you know what? Every feature film I've written and directed, I've actually delivered the final film in HD, which having been a broadcast HD timeline that was scaled up at the last minute and a little tiny bit of sharpening added. No one's ever noticed in 10 years. So those who cry about not being full HD. I mean, actually, let me show you how extreme my feelings about that are. If you go back to Vegas, you'll notice right here I've got a quick blur. The entire timeline of the entire show actually has a blur on it. So that when it's full size, it's actually not as sharp as it really is. That's the full sharp show. And I've actually added a tiny quick blur to the whole thing. So there you go. Why, that's insane. You can't do that. Yeah, actually you can. All right, so here we go. There's that. And we'll just save this. So now 351 is recovered. The only thing we don't have is the ability to have the independent layers, but it doesn't matter. We're going to add this layer now. Now this is going to be tricky. This is going to be tricky. We don't have a good, frankly, this is where Krita kind of sucks, is there really is not a good clone brush. I think, let me think about this. I got to look at the brush settings. I forgot. Ed, actually, if you're here, Ed, and you remember or know how to do this, chime in and let me know. Yes, I'm mostly Jay Bishop. I'm mostly in Krita today. Strengths and weaknesses. See what I said? This is the question everybody asks. Krita's a better paint program. You know what? I'm going to throw it back to you, Jay Bishop. Let me ask you this. And I want you to get real specific. I want you to see ya, Ed, by the way. Please do me this favor. as honestly as you can reach deep down in yourself and ask yourself this question. Why are you asking me that? What is it you're really trying to get to that would cause you to ask that question? I really would like you to tell me that. And then, based on your reason for asking the question, I'll be in a better position to answer it in a way that's actually useful for you. Okay? So what I was going to ask Ed is, it seems to me there's a really quick way to change any brush into a clone brush. And it might be the engine, My Paint clone. There's a clone engine. So where's my previewer though? Okay, I'm not going to save that as a preset. I'm just going to see what happens. I'm assuming that this is what you would do. Okay, and I'm in the wrong layer. This is additionally tricky because, yeah, I'm going to have to clone. Okay, so actually problem solved, guys. So the bad news is there's really not a way to... I guess there is. Okay, strike that. I was wrong. Okay, so this is good news. Good news, everyone. Okay, so the good news is if you need to do cloning in Krita, you can take any brush where you like the characteristics of the brush, go into the brush editor, and just change the brush engine by hitting this little plus thing here. Change it to the clone engine right here. So what that means is everything else about the brush is going to be the same, but it's now going to be a clone brush. So then what you would do in the case here, I'm trying to create a layer that I can go ahead and use on other shots that use this same background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sample here in this layer, but then switch to this layer and paint with my clone brush. Okay? So here, I've got to, unfortunately, I have to jump between layers. I'm going to make this a little smaller. And I'm going to go ahead and dial down the opacity as well so that it requires a little bit more work to get the cloning in there. But and then also hotkey wise, I think if I hit page down, yes, page down lets me toggle between the layers, and page up obviously goes back to the other one. So now I can go ahead and fix this with a clone brush. So there you go. And actually that's a lesson for me because I really haven't fiddled around with cloning in Krita at all because, you know, in GIMP you just have a clone tool, you know. In Krita you have to specifically go into the brush engine and fiddle with it that way. So I've tended to avoid it. But this is great. This is actually quite useful. I don't know if I can agree with that, Tom. Copy a patch from elsewhere for this whole thing. Yeah, maybe, but I'm not feeling that one. I'm not feeling that. There's too much variance in the you know, what's got to be painted. Now what I'm not liking here, click, control click, and then go here. Okay, this I don't like either, as long as we're finding things to complain about. In GIMP, if you lifted up your stylus and moved it, the anchored clone position, which is the circle on the right, would stay where it is. In my experience, that's a much better way for a clone tool to work, because it allows you to take one little bit here and use it all over the place. Hope that makes sense. So it's all good. It's all good. So the advantage of the Krita tool is that you can go like this theoretically. You could, I think, you can just paint horizontally down the page and you're going to get the clone moves with you. So you see what I'm doing? It's not perfect though. It won't ever be. So then you got to go in and manually still fix some stuff, right? But not bad, not bad. I mean, it just looks like sort of noise in the wall, and if you solo the patch, that's what I'm actually creating. So then that will be able to be, you know, basically baked into the background painting in other instances of it where it happens to appear. So pretty good solution. Takes a little time, but you know, doing the trick. Copy patch is like a one dab clone process, as I see you like there to preserve. Well, correct. The variant, if it was a simple cloning job, then yeah, right? But this is not a simple cloning job because there's a lot of variation in the surfaces here. So if you move your brush up and down, what you see is there are places where it's going to work and there's places where it's not going to work. Right? Like right there, it's probably not going to work too well. And so where it doesn't work, what you wind up with is the situation where you did the clone job and it actually didn't do you any good because it just redrew the line in there. The light line, I mean. So I do not actually love Krita's approach to cloning, but it's okay. I like it better than Blender's, but not as well as GIMP's. GIMP's pretty much got it going on with cloning because you can immediately just invoke the clone tool, and whatever brush you happen to be using is what the brush will be. It's very, very good. I haven't really used GIMP in quite a long time, though. I used to use it all the time. It's pretty much been supplanted by Krita. Okay, so that I don't like. Yeah, right. Seriously, dude? So I'm going to sample that. Yeah. Yuck. Yuck. I do not like the way the clone. Now, to be fair, there may be a way to lock it. Gosh, I don't want to take the time to try to figure that out right now. There may be a way to lock it, though. Yeah. In other words, as I say, the way it works in GIMP is if you brush, and move around, like I'm doing here, the clone source will move with you. But if you lift up your stylus, it stays put. And then you put the stylus back down somewhere else, and so you're still cloning from the same source, and then the relationship between the two changes. So I hope that makes sense. So truth of the matter is I'm using this the way I would use it in GIMP because that's kind of what I'm used to, and it's not actually working that well. So that's okay. I'm having to be fairly careful. Being careful isn't the worst thing. Now, if these stay together, this might actually work here, and it looks like it did. See, this will work. I can just run vertically up the wall, and I'm getting away with it. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I seem to have gotten the brush size and the positioning of the clone to the replacement. It looks like I've kind of gotten lucky. So we're still seeing some slight hints of that that shadow. So I'm just sort of judiciously popping some variance in here and there to see how it feels. Now it just looks like there's some crap on the walls, you know. Not too bad. If we take it off, is that a little more suitable, friends? You guys okay with that? A brush set to lighten mode, sample from a nearby stone, it'll affect only the dark values. Oh, that's a good idea. I guess we'll give that a try just for fun. So we put this in lighten mode. Yeah, I didn't even think about fiddling with the blend modes. So here we're going to sample that, and sort of worked. There's so much cool stuff you can do with blend modes if you just work with it, play with it, try things. But I think we're in pretty good shape here. I think we're in pretty good shape. I'm actually going to put this in darken mode. See if I can smack a little bit of... Well, actually, let's do multiply. There we go. Yep, and let's turn the opacity down even further. Just want to ease a little bit of that in. Background painting is like a drug. If you do a little more of it, it's a lot of fun, frankly, and it's something you can get lost in, really. Okay, I think we're okay. So now, because this needs to prevail over the entire shot, we have to just leave that layer in there as a separate layer. I don't want to bake it into the whole thing. We'll just leave it at that. Save that, and then what we're going to do is we're going to literally render over 351. 351. 351, period. Oops. 351, period. Okay, I think we're good. And then we'll see what other shots need that same correction, and we'll keep this open in case we need to use that layer again. Okay, so we have the shadows here, obviously. This is the shot that's more egregious. So let's pull up 357. Isn't that fun? Aren't we having fun? 357. What a life we lead. We just sit and play with our paints. Okay, this is unfortunately, I will say, let me hit the N key. Yes, I'll tell you what I'm going to do to just save myself some hassle right now. Is immediately scale this down. I haven't been working at full HD on this cartoon stuff for a long time, and it's just, this is what we're going to do. So there we go. We're going to take this entire shot and just scale it down so that when we cut and paste the patch in from the other shot, it'll fit. Otherwise, I have to resize it and try to make it work, which is stupid. Okay, so Jay Bishop, thank you for being so patient. I get that they're all just tools, but these are free, right? Yes, Krita, Tahoma, and Blender, all free. So that's a big incentive to make the switch from... Oh, you're using Photoshop. That's right. You were telling us the other day about... yeah, so I would say I do not know. If I was going to make a comparison for animation with Photoshop, I don't really know about the capabilities of Photoshop for animation. My understanding is it's pretty good in terms of for frame-by-frame animation. And if you want to go beyond that, most people that are Adobe people are going to probably use Adobe Animate or After Effects. Okay, so I think it's safe to say that in terms of stability and in terms of capability, probably the Adobe suite, you're not going to gain much by going to Krita from Photoshop. So it really would depend on what you're trying to do animation-wise. If you wanted an adjunct to Photoshop that would be just a killer tool that is a tangible improvement over what you currently have in your toolkit, it would probably be Blender. You know, just because of the marriage of 2D and 3D and the grease pencil and, you know, rigging and all the rest. So, I mean, I would think, I'm just spitballing here, and after looking at the thing you're working on, the name escapes me at the moment, I apologize for that. Any of these tools would be fine for a project like that. So Toon Boom's your background for animation, Photoshop for painting background. Oh, okay. Toon Boom. Okay, well isn't Toon Boom pretty much a vector-based type of program? Yeah, the Veil. Okay, so they use Photoshop on the Veil. And if you're a Toon Boom person, I haven't really met a lot of people here that have a lot of experience with Toon Boom. I think A&B Animation uses Toon Boom, if I'm not mistaken. So hang on a second. I need to copy this layer and then paste this layer. Look at that, just like magic. Okay, we do have a little bit of a problem here though, because we have to take this. So I can't speak to Toon Boom too much. Back in the day, I played around with a crack of it just to see if it's something that was going to be interesting to me, and I wasn't real blown away. But, you know, your mileage may vary. It's clearly there's a lot of, you know, network quality broadcast animation that's been done with Toon Boom. So, you know, it's got that going for it. You're going to find the vector tools in Tahoma to be vastly inferior. Vastly inferior. Not even close. I will bet you to what you have with Toon Boom, both in terms of capability and in terms of stability. Not even close. You're not going to gain anything, and you're going to be really, really frustrated if you go over to OpenToons or Tahoma for the vector stuff. For stupid reasons I won't even get into. There's too many reasons. The vectors have some uses. I tend to use them for shadows because I can draw filled shapes. But beyond that, you know, we'll leave that one sit, you know. So yeah, especially if you're a vector guy, I'd be very reticent to be getting too serious about making any changes in that regard. Okay, this is 357. Let's get her into the show. You know, if I was going to do something that and by the way, the same thing with Krita. The vector levels in Krita, which are basically SVG, so you can cut and paste from probably Photoshop or certainly Illustrator or Inkscape. You can paste into Krita. So you have vector levels in Krita, but guess what? They're not animatable. A little bit animatable because you can use a transform mask on them, but basically it's pretty primitive, okay? And not only that, but vectors, in my experience, vectors in Krita are extremely non-performant. In other words, you can have, I've got a 12-core machine here with 32 gigabyte of memory, and if I bring in a vector level, it's like, I feel like it's 1993, you know? I mean, the performance is so bad. It's pathetic. Toon Boom is almost too vector-based. I prefer, okay, if you want the softer look, and that's what you're going for, then you're going to be okay with Tahoma, you're going to be okay with Krita. As I said this morning, it's an ongoing thing. It's the question people ask here way more than any other question, is what are the pros and cons? The pros and cons are almost too many to enumerate. If you like frame-by-frame, cell-based animation, then you know, in other words, if you're anchored to the real fundamentals of animation where you like to draw a lot of pictures and then you ink and paint them, it almost doesn't matter which one you use. It's kind of a similar process. The only advantage you really get with Tahoma in that regard would be the procedural palette, which means that, like, if I wanted to, like, the color of her clothing, I could change the color over here, for example, and it would just change in real time. How often do you really need that? In my experience, not very often. And you can achieve the same thing in Krita by simply having the colors on their own layer. And then you just apply a hue shift to it. You know, you just go in and add a transform mask or a, you know, so it's not like you can't change them, right? So if you plan ahead and use plenty of layers liberally, then all the benefits of Tahoma in that regard are matched by Krita. The big difference between Tahoma and Krita in terms of animation workflow for real people trying to get real work done would be this. Krita has liquefy, okay? And you can apply liquefy to groups as well. So now I can take Krita, or I can take Tianara here, and I can mush her around and I can sculpt her. Okay? There is nothing in OpenToonz or Tahoma that even comes close to what you can do with liquefy. And I know Photoshop has a similar tool. Okay? On the other hand, Tahoma has a bone system that lets you do deforming skeletons, and what I found is that for small amounts of secondary animation, like a little turn of the head or a shift of the weight, it's awesome. And it's fast to use. You can just dial it in a hurry. And so for shots like these down here, like this one, 407, let me look at this. Yes, 407, great example. Okay, so pop this open into Tahoma, I'll show you. Okay, so there's 407. And so what we see here in 407 is this is pixel-based art that was actually created in Krita. Okay, so the one thing you get with Krita, or I'm sorry, with Tahoma 2D as opposed to OpenToonz, is you can cut and paste art that you created in Krita into Tahoma 2D through the clipboard. That's really, really useful, because not only can you cut and paste, but you can cut and paste entire groups. So this group right here has all of Tianara's different layers. So I can block in animation in Krita if I want to, and then I can copy. Well, actually, what I do is I would just do Control C, so it's copying the projected pixel art. And then I come over into Tahoma 2D and I can just go Control V, and a moment later, there it is. Okay, so the workability of the two together is pretty good. And so then here we've got a static image, and I'm sure this only took like 1 minute to do, to set up a rig. Very simple, as you can see, very simple, kind of hard to control. If you really wanted to control this better, what you would do is you'd use utility bones. Like from here, you might add a bone here and a bone here that gives you a little better control so he doesn't deform as much, that type of thing. And then you say, well, but his mouth isn't moving, and that's okay too, because then what you do is you take his mouth, which is column 4, I think, and you just pipe it through the plastic tool. Now it needs an initial transform in order to work because it's in the wrong position, but as you can see, it is deforming. Okay, so for quick and dirty secondary animation, the plastic tool is quite useful. If you want to get a little deeper into a full-blown rigging setup, which you can do obviously in Toon Boom, you're going to be disappointed, because you're going to start bumping into all the edge cases where the sophistication of the tools falls apart. Okay, you can either trust me on that or not, but that's from a couple years of experience working with the plastic tool a lot. So if it's quick and dirty stuff that you can kind of envision in your mind exactly what you want to do, you're probably going to be able to get, save some time and just add a little bit of quality to the animation. This little bit here with Golik was done with liquefy and probably would have been better done with the plastic tool in Tahoma, because it's a little, it's a little mushy and kind of stupid looking, but anywho. So that pretty much sums up the key differences in terms of why you'd pick one over the other. Let's put it that way. All right, so I'm going to save this. I think I already rendered it. Let me double check. How long are we going here? Oh my gosh, 2.5 hours. 12:24. Yeah, it's probably getting time for lunch here soon. All right, so there's this. Why does this shot have... I did not render it. Okay, there you go. 357, render. Got to get it rendered. Hope that helps, Jay Bishop. You say Toon Boom is almost too vector based. I prefer software look. Well, you know, I still have it. I just don't have it installed anywhere. CorelDRAW, you know, back in the day, the Corel Rave, which was basically their clone of Flash, you know, it was Bezier curve based vectors and completely the opposite of what you get with the Blender Grease Pencil, for example. I'm a more frame-by-frame traditional animator, which is why I'm liking what I'm seeing in your work, these tools. Okay, yeah, if you're going to do the frame-by-frame thing and you want a pixel-based look and, you know, just kind of the way you can work with the pencil, you know, so it feels like traditional animation, you might enjoy working with Krita and Tahoma better. Definitely. That could be the case. Okay, so now we have a problem. And the problem is this is 357 over here, and this is 350. That's the problem. I am an idiot. I need to pull up 350. Let me make sure I don't have it open already. Yeah, I don't. Okay. Sorry. 350. There it is. If you want to talk about sort of practical pros and cons, I will say that Krita embeds all the frame information in the Krita file, okay? As opposed to referencing individual images on disk. So then the question would become, is that a good thing or a bad thing? In my experiences, it's almost always a good thing. So you can, and it's the reason why I was able to load up 351, the renders, load them into Krita, make the change with the lighting, and then re-render back over the same images. Because once they were loaded into Krita, they are in the Krita file. They're no longer referencing the images on disk. In my experience, that's almost always a good thing. Tahoma's the complete opposite. Everything is referencing images on disk, and you have to be a little more careful about not overwriting things. And it's a little clunkier to fix things. If you want to fix things sort of procedurally by using images that are being referenced on disk, such that if you change the image, you can load 3 or 4 other scenes that use that same image and just re-render them so your changes propagate, then you can still do that in Krita. You do it by loading in, for example, loading in a background image. Instead of loading it in or just dragging and dropping it into Krita, what you do is you, I forget what Krita calls it. Let me try it here real quick. If I drag an image in from my disk and I load it in as a file layer, then it actually references the on-disk image. And if the on-disk image, I have to reload the Krita file, but it will always reference the image if I load it as a file layer. And I believe if I load it as a file layer, it is also, I don't know that it's editable in here either. It probably is not. Okay, Krita, you're acting stupid. I don't want to see the pop-up. A key. And it doesn't work. Okay, so functionally, if you reference an image from disk in Krita, it's effectively locked. So you can do it. Maybe you can add things like, you can probably add like color correction filters that are like a filter mask. But, okay, so That was a great summary of the tools, really helpful. Tahoma reminds me of Linux style of things organized in exploded format in folders on disk. That's a fair analogy. Okay, I resized this image, so that means that I need to apply a transform mask to Tianara because she's the wrong size now. So not a big deal. I'm just going to hit the A key and resize her up a little bit, like so. And now everything will work magically. And we can come back over to here, copy this layer, and same thing we did before, paste it in. And what went wrong? Oh, nothing went wrong. Maybe it's because of the transform mask? Let's kill this. Let's kill all these layers. There we go. So I guess we had a little bit of a buffering issue there. And actually, that's actually very illustrative of what can go wrong with Krita. Once you start adding transform masks and things like that, that's where you're asking for crashes to happen. Krita has a certain performance threshold, and once you hit it, you're going to be crying. But you can get around it. What you do is, if you made this change, like in this case I resized her, okay, it's going to have to recalculate that sizing for every single one of these animated frames. So it's no wonder the performance bogs down. So the way you protect yourself, if you want to be able to roll it back, you could commit to it by just flattening the layer. If you flatten the layer, then the translation is going to be baked in. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to. Just take the layer that has the transform mask, duplicate it, turn off the duplicate, and then flatten the other one. Now you've got a safety backup copy that doesn't give you a performance penalty for the simple reason that it's turned off, right? So now in this case, that's kind of stupid. We don't really need to do that. What we do need to do is fix this problem. So let's go here, and we're going to go Control Insert. So we insert an animation keyframe there, and then boop, insert there. This is going to be a duplicate, obviously. Same thing we did before. So that needs to be there. And then I think it cuts back to Golik here. Okay, so now we can render this one. Did I just make a change? I don't know. Yep, I did. Sorry about that. Why does Golik's mouth look like it's offset a little bit? Okay, I would guess, friends, that something about the scaling of the whole image caused his mouth to get off kilter. So let's fix it this way. Let me see. It looks like it's off everywhere. And Tia's might be off too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually apply a transform mask to this layer as well. Okay, so the transform masks are a Krita 5 thing, and they're quite useful. You can animate them, but you know, again, you're going to start running into performance penalties. So do so judiciously. But there we go. I would say that probably did the trick. I am going to take a chance and flatten that layer and hope that it worked. And if it didn't, I'll just hit undo. Well, looks like we're in good shape. Cool beans. Save our work. This is shot number 350. Have I rendered this before since we've been in Krita 5? It looks like we have. So that will fix the background painting. Okay, let's go back here. And I think maybe, okay, we've got the long shot, the wide shot. 354. Kind of sad how many of these I have to fix, but oh well, gives me something to do, keeps me out of trouble. Okay, so now here's the background, I bet. Yes, and do we still have our clone brush? I'll bet we do. I'm going to do this the hard way. I'm going to isolate the layer. And I'm going to bake it right in. I'm not going to dick around with using a separate layer. I don't care. Right. Right. That's what I'm talking about. So what do you guys think about Will Smith's little shenanigans? Has it come out that that was actually staged? My understanding is that it was not staged, that it was real. If nobody has a strong opinion about it, I'll tell you what my very strong opinion is about it. Just because it's fun to be controversial. Anybody curious about that? Everybody know what I'm talking about? So at the Academy Awards, Chris Rock made a joke. He basically made a joke on Will Smith's wife. It looked staged. Did not look staged. So we got varying opinions about it. Kyle, my son, said he thinks it might have been staged. Here's what I think about it, though. It's the same problem that you have with religion. And I can say this with authority as a guy who, in the filmmaking world, am identified with Christian-themed films, right? So as a guy who identified as an evangelical Christian for many years, and I don't anymore. I still identify as a Christian, but definitely not an evangelical. Anyway, here's the problem. After Will loses his temper and smacks Chris, whether it was staged or not, kind of irrelevant actually to my point. Then he gets up after he wins the Best Actor award, and he talks, and he in tears he talks about how he's all about love and he's impassioned about how he's all about defending his family, and it's like this righteous indignation. So now you think about that. How often has that happened in history? The people who claim the moral high ground, that, you know, I'm all about love. I'm the good guy. I'm the hero. I'm going to defend my family. And because of that, because my moral values are so high and mighty and so much higher than yours, that means I get to be the arbiter of justice. Because I'm such a righteous, wonderful, powerful, amazing guy who loves his family and is so devoted to protecting them. Therefore, that justifies going up and clocking this guy. Yeah, it's okay because I am so morally superior that when I do it, it's okay. When others do it, it's probably bad. But when I do it, oh, it's fine. Because I'm all about love. Do you kind of see the contradiction there? Yeah. To which I say, Will Smith, you are nothing but an asshole. Actually, I shouldn't say that. What I should say is, you are so deceived. You have been tricked into thinking you're something that you're not. And your ego is so inflated with both your success and your experience of being this person that you harbor the conceit that you're this moral, love-driven, values-driven kind of guy, that you have been sucked into the quintessential trap of thinking that now that makes you the arbiter of morality, and it justifies egregious behavior that's exactly the kind of thing you yourself would, in another context, object to. It's the quintessential problem, that it's the trap that religion tends to suck people into, and it's so obvious. So I kind of feel bad for him in the sense that he doesn't even realize how foolish he's being. He doesn't even see the contradiction clearly. But it's pretty stark contradiction between what you say you're about and what you actually are doing and justifying. So that's my opinion. I'd be hard-pressed to change it, but I'm always open to another opinion. So if somebody disagrees with me, feel free to speak up. I will not be offended. I absolutely always love to hear a contrary point of view, because I have been an idiot plenty of times in my life. If he was a vessel of love, I'd like to say, well, exactly. Exactly. Vessel of love. No, the thing the reason it's sad to me and a bit silly is that I actually believe Will. I do believe that when what he's talking about, the way he feels about his family and all that, I believe he's sincere. What's sad about it is that as a man, he does not see the contradiction, and he's justifying it. So if you think about sort of moral character, okay, if you think, let's say at 10 I'm Jesus or Buddha or something, I'm like really the truly living, loving, giving, sacrificial kind of person, and then at the bottom, I'm, let's just say, I don't know. Right now we'll pick on Vladimir Putin since everybody's picking on him. Will thinks he's at 7 or 8 when he's actually at 3 or 4. That's the problem. And he doesn't realize how wrong he is. But he will, because I think he's on a path that, as I say, is sincere, and probably in a later time he'll correct that mistake. The caveat being that it is very possible that the whole thing was staged anyway, and that's actually the reason why Chris isn't pressing charges and blah, blah, blah. So, this is shot number 354, yes. Cool beans, that was easy. There's something cultish going on in society these days. The emotional over-rational stuff has become more prevalent. Well, it is, and I speculate, Tom, that part of that is a rejection of both traditional Christian values here in the West, in the sense that people are not comfortable with the cultish nature of evangelical Christianity, which is, of course, well, at least Christianity in general is the dominant religion. I think people are kind of waking up to something doesn't quite smell right about it. And I think they're correct. I mean, it's really easy to indict Christianity if you go back, way back in history. You look at all the way back to the beginning of organized Christianity, when Titus Flavius worked together with Constantine to establish this new religion of peace and meekness. There were some very specific reasons. That's why I find it kind of ironic when Christians point to Josephus Flavius as a source of good history, as a Jewish historian. Christians will say he's a reliable historian because he's not a Christian. He's a Jew, and so we can kind of put more stock in what he wrote. Well, what they forget is that Josephus was a Jewish historian who switched sides to join up with Rome, because the Romans said, you know what, you're toast, buddy, unless you start writing history for us. And everything we have of Josephus is actually from after he switched sides. And he was writing history specifically to support the Roman point of view. Right? Anyway, but yeah, people smell something's wrong about this. Something doesn't feel right about it. And so you're seeing this push towards what I guess some Christians would probably call sort of New Age religion, that's sort of a non-Christian flavor of morality. It's got its place, I mean, I think it can be helpful. There's some strange traditions out there, like the Law of One, or, the Abraham Hicks mythology that Esther Hicks has been propagating for years. There's a lot of really good ideas there, actually, I think. I'm in the definite minority of people who identify as a Christian in regard to feeling that way, but that's how I feel. I mean, you could talk a lot about this stuff, and I will basically be the most boring guy in the world, I'm sure. Let's flatten this group. I'm just going to go ahead and merge this group, I'm sorry, is what I meant, and do the blur thing and scale it just like I did before. I just don't remember I don't remember what the settings were, so I'm just going to wing it. Wing it. I think I probably did it twice, and then by scaling it, yeah, so obviously we've got to scale it vertically as well. Something like that would probably be okay for this shot. And we'll save our work and render it. Amplifying emotions and emotional response. Well, correct. And that's what, I mean, frankly, that's what evangelical Christianity is really good at, is the emotional game. And I'm not even saying that's a bad thing entirely. I mean, if people get together and they hear music and then they make a neurological connection in their brain where they discern that the emotional experience I'm having is actually God doing something, I happen to think that's completely silly. I think it's totally overblown, and Christians are just kind of willing idiots about that. It's just, to me, it's just ridiculous. That doesn't mean that the emotional experience is a bad thing. You know, it's nice to get together with a bunch of people and hear some music that inspires you and makes you feel good, and if it makes you, you know, feel like loving your neighbor, yeah, okay. Nothing wrong with that. But to then take the jump of saying, okay, that's the Holy Spirit moving, is just stupid. I mean, to me, it's comically dumb. So, you know, that's the world we live in. But that's evangelicals make those sorts of connections all the time between the emotional and the spiritual, and it's actually why you have this, again, I think comically ridiculous conflation between evangelical Christianity and the political right. I get the fact that the right to life issue is a pet issue. But once you get past that, the contradiction in terms between morality and what Christians say they're all about just makes you wag your head in disbelief. That's my opinion. Again, other people may disagree. I think the only way you can deal with the socio-political, moral, ethical, religious issues is you have to deal with them one at a time. It's not that you want to forget the context, but you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's why I say coming together to listen to inspiring music and pray is a good thing. Calling that a move of the Spirit, or even calling it worship, I think is silly, because it's causing you in your brain to deliberately and willingly and constantly make those false conflations that become a part of the way you view the world. It becomes part of your worldview. And Jay Bishop might be right. See, what I say to that, obviously what you're stating in a very short space here is a conspiracy theory. That doesn't mean it's wrong. You might be completely right. The truth is, there's probably a lot of truth to it, and there's probably a lot of exceptions to it. This is the problem that we have in the public discourse. The problem that we have, largely because the news media talking heads only have 40 seconds to make their point. We can't get into the nuance of, if you make a simple statement, like if you say Hollywood is full of fake people, okay, it makes it sound like everybody in Hollywood is part of this sort of corrupt conspiracy that you're describing. And the truth is, probably some people in Hollywood are, and some people aren't. That's actually the truth. But we don't in the public discourse, we don't really have time, or necessarily the patience, to deal with nuance. And if you can't deal with nuance, usually you cannot get to the truth of a matter. You actually cannot even describe what the real true situation is unless you deal with the nuance of it. But what we do is we tend to go for that which is simple. So again, getting back to the Christian example, I know people who specifically said in 2020, I am going to vote for Donald Trump. Okay, that's cool. Why? He's pro-life. So because he aligned with the Republican Party in terms of his political choice in order to best optimize his chances of being elected, which there's nothing wrong with that, for a Christian to make a value judgment about who to vote for based on the fact that he's aligned with the party that says they're aligned with, you know, human life as being a strong value is pretty simplistic, don't you think? You know, especially if you know, because people, you know, politically, you know, you get into, well, what about, you know, what about GMO crops, or what about exploiting and raping the land and all these things that the environmentalists complain about? That those issues are anathema to people on the right, and yet those issues speak directly to the sanctity of life for the people who are already here. Okay? I get the idea of the sanctity of life for the unborn, but what about the people who are already here? And that problem Tom just brought up in his comment is actually you cannot effectively vote the issue or the personality. Both are too simplistic, right? Because what you're really voting is a platform. You're voting for a person who has adopted a platform, and the platform is a grossly simplistic picture of what the package of solutions that we need in our world. You know, you have to have this simplistic package to give people something really simple to vote for, because it's A or B. You only can pick one or the other, right? Republican or Democrat kind of thing, right? So you have to choose. So anyway, you know, obviously our system is designed for gridlock, and in many respects that's a good thing, because it keeps the new government, you know, you have a Republican president and maybe he's able to pass a whole bunch of laws, and then what happens is a Democrat comes in and they just basically roll back all those laws overnight and pass a whole new bunch of laws, right? That's what our system tends to discourage because of the gridlock factor. And I would say generally that's probably a good thing. The downside of it is that nothing gets done, and it takes forever to get something done, and when something significant gets done, it's pretty rare. Okay, so now it's 363 has the same issue, so here we go. Let's close that, and then let's go back to methinks probably this one. Did I bake it in? Let's go here. I did not, so this is good. Wait, did I? Nope. So we got this. So there's good and bad in every group. I totally agree. Yep. Gridlock mostly, but it's like a person with severe mood swings going from party to party. It's difficult. You know, there's so many issues that we could talk about, and so at this point in life, my basic spin on it is I have a lot of ideas about these things, of course, but my basic thinking is that I'm going to bake this down, by the way, so I can just cut and paste the whole image. So give me half a second here to go Control C, and then I am not going to save this. So my basic, sometimes I pontificate a little bit here, obviously, but my basic approach at this point in life is that if I really have something to say and potentially I want it to be heard, then I'll make my point through a story for two reasons. One, because it's more fun to do so, and it may be more palatable to make a point through a story. But also, and I've made this point before, is that if you make your point through a story, you really are kind of obligated to make sure that you understand both points of view, because you need a character who represents the point of view that you disagree with, right? And I think that's kind of a cool thing. Okay, stop. Made a mistake. Let's undo that. Okay, so we have to scale this. Scale image to new size, and then I will paste in the background image and we'll be good to go. And I'm just going to do Control Shift V, so I'm actually pasting into the current layer. Fixed. And now I can save that and should be able to render it probably directly. It looks to me like yes, these are the correct render settings, and there we go. So I think the worst The general person is distracted by it, gives way too much credence. Oh, technology develops more in control over the general population. I get where you guys are going. I tell you this, I think that if most people want to have a reasonably balanced view of kind of what's good and what's bad in socio-political culture, what you want to do is make it your aim to look at, don't look for conspiracies. They may exist. They may exist, and usually they do exist in pockets. But what you really want to look at is incentives. When things go sideways, it's usually because the incentives in place naturally push things in a negative direction, as opposed to being actually by design. Sometimes there is, malevolent design, no question about it. But I think most of what we deal with is just a matter of the incentives in play just tend to push us in a fairly predictable direction, which again in America is gridlock most of the time. All right, where are we at here, folks? We've got this. Oh my gosh, we got 2 more shots to deal with here, guys. I think I'm gonna have to quit. I'm starting to get brain tired. When I feel myself going, oh golly, another one. It's probably time to take a break. So I've been going for 3 hours anyway. Like, how much publicity has this Will Smith thing gotten in the world media? There's far bigger issues, but a lot of people are more concerned with celebrity. Absolutely. Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's exactly. Like, if you want to understand why Fox News is very tilted to the right, it isn't because Rupert Murdoch or whoever's running Fox today may have very right-leaning politics. That's true. But I will guarantee you that if leaning to the left shored up or grew their audience so that the eyeballs that they're selling to advertisers, that's what they were paying for, then they'd be tilted in that direction. The incentive is to sell eyeballs. And so it's completely understandable, and they each have their niches. Obviously, MSNBC is tilted to the left. CNN's slightly to the right of MSNBC, but still tilted to the left. Fox is tilted to the right. And your Newsmaxes obviously are way to the right, yada, yada, yada. And if you want objectivity, in my experience, you're going to be looking, frankly, to a degree at networks like Al Jazeera, and probably to a greater degree, I've been pretty impressed with WION or WION, W-I-O-N, the Indian news network. They seem to really fall all over themselves trying to provide both sides of the story, So, but they all have biases. There's no question about it. I mean, I would say WION has a bias, a little bit of a bias against the United States in general, not left or right, but just against the U.S., like that type of thing. And that's good. That's fair. They have the right to do that, and there's plenty of things about the U.S. you can criticize. Where energy can come from, yes. Stable, boring, no energy, crazy, inflammatory energy interests, yes. Yeah, the more energy, the more eyeballs, the more advertising revenue. It's all very commonsensical. So, anyway, and no big deal. And by the way, most significantly, nothing to get all freaked out and upset about or angry at your neighbor. If you have a completely different politics than me, that doesn't mean you're not my friend. Because you have a right to your opinion, and if I want to try to persuade you, I can. And if I become annoying, you can walk away. Great video today. Enjoyed the animation. Talk about the software and the world issues. It's very great. All right, yes, and I'm going to sign off because I got to get some lunch and kind of go to the next chapter of my day. And so thanks for being here. As you guys know, there will